Hi everyone, how are you doing? Ni hao. Thank you for joining in for today's show. I'm really happy and excited to be here. And before I tell you more about myself and the work that I do, I'd like to say a big thanks to Straits Times Press and Singapore Book Fair for inviting me to share more about my book, Making a Difference, which I'm hoping you will all read. So I'm a journalist. I've done nothing else but journalism all these past few years. And I've been in the profession for 3 decades now. I'm Singaporean. And for the past 20 years, I've worked only with the Straits Times. And before that, I was in India working with a leading news magazine there, doing business and investigative stories. So journalism is really happened quite by chance, but I'm very thrilled and excited. And I really, in the coming few years, I don't see myself doing anything more than just journalism. So I'm going to talk to you more about this book that we are going to be discussing today. And I'm hoping many of you have signed in to know more about this book. So, this book is really about World News Day. So, what is World News Day? World News Day is a celebration of journalism. It's a platform that was created a couple of years ago, where it was started by the Canadian Journalism Foundation to create greater awareness, greater impact about the work that journalists do and the difference that they can make to their communities. Um, what has happened is uh, it was largely celebrated in the West, but our editor in chief, Warren Fernandez, became president of the World Editors Forum, which is like a network of editors within one IFRA, which is one of the world's largest communities of editors and publishers. And we decided jointly that we need to do something more to promote journalism itself. And that's how World News Day was born. So what we do for World News Day is we reach out to members all over the world to ask them to contribute one of the only stories, just one story where they could make a big difference to their communities. And that's how on September 28th, which is World News Day, we mark journalism. We celebrate the good work we've been doing. And it is a signal of hope, of encouragement to say that there is a positive difference that we can make to the lives of our communities. So, as I was talking around to people, they were asking me, does journalism really matter? Yes, journalism can make a huge difference to the lives of people. I think the first key role that we play is just to be able to share information accurately. People need to understand these things so much more to be able to make up their own minds on how they should act, how they should react. We live in an integrated world. Everyone's measures, everyone's actions matter so that collectively all of us are safe. Journalism has a much bigger role to play. It's firstly about giving accurate information. Secondly, it's about giving different perspectives on the matter. It's about being able to share what different people in our community are doing. So, for instance, if you take COVID 19, there's so much of scientific effort and research going on. So, journalists come in and explain all these things in a very easily understandable manner so that people can figure out, okay, what's going on? How does coronavirus really impact or affect my body once I get it? What happens in ICU? There are so many complex matters. Why is it that it's affecting the elderly so much? So journalists have a very important role to be able to share crucial information with people in an easily understandable manner. There is a third important role that journalists can play, and that is like you need to critically analyze the information. We live in an era of fake news, so we need to tell people what is correct and what is not correct. Just in the past few weeks, we've had a few instances of fake news, and that can have very serious consequences. There was one about NEA officials going from home to home to catch all those people who could have been flouting circuit breaker rules. That wasn't true at all. There was another that PM is going to come out with an announcement that people can move around only in the areas they could live in. There was no such, even there was no, on the date that was given, there was no such announcement, even talk kind of scheduled by the PM. So we live in very complex times, and journalists have a very important role to play in ensuring that people get correct information and information that will do good for a wider community. So there are several good stories in the book. You just have to buy it, and you'll be able to get 25 stories in there. But let me share with you the one story that stays with me even today, and that's one done by my colleague Salma Khalid on this 84-year-old guy. His name is Mr. Xiao, who managed to bring about change in Singapore's health system. So he went to hospital because he had a problem with his tear ducts, and this was in preparation for a cataract surgery. And he was prepared to pay a small amount. But it was when he got his insurance claim, his bill was in thousands, but he got only $4.50. And this came to Salma's notice, and she spent 4 months trying to investigate, okay, what had gone wrong? How did this happen? And it came to light that at least for one institution, the rates had been raised and it wasn't commensurate with the insurance possible. So the whole matter was brought up in Parliament. There was discussion on it, and finally the government decided that it would review the limits every 3 years instead of 5 years. So that's one story where Salma made a big difference through this, and this is going to be benefiting so many more people. So, in the book, I wish I could take you through some of the pages in here. There are so many stories that have made a big difference. Let me share two or three with you just for today's talk. There's another story that was filed by our Malaysia partner, the Star newspaper, where they focused on these Bangladeshi students who were coming into the country to pursue higher education. But what was happening is that they had a huge amount of debt and they were lured to be workers. They were getting very minimal sums but they had debts to repay. So they stayed quiet. They kept working, because they didn't even have a permit to be able to do those jobs. And education, they never got the tertiary education. So the STAR team spent a lot of time and figured out the entire human trafficking network in the country. That's one story that you will really find interesting. In Indonesia, there's a heart wrenching story about sexual abuse that happens in campuses, both because of peer pressure and because it involved lecturers. And this is not only in Jakarta, but it was in provinces. So these were young, vulnerable girls who were becoming victims. So Jakarta Post did an expose on that, and you just read through it, and your heart goes out to all those victims who would be affected. Our India partner, the Hindu Business Line, did another troubling story. This is about homeless women. Now, there are these several thousands of women in villages who take up contract work to be cane cutters. But there is a fine if you don't turn up for work or because of various reasons if there is delay. So what these women do is they just volunteer for hysterectomies to be able to secure their income. That's really sad, and but it was happening. So the Hindu Business Line exposed this, and the state government is taking action. So readers will benefit by buying this book because it's all about hope. It tells you about the good work that journalism does to be able to bring stories to light that would benefit much bigger communities. And it gives you reason to look forward to changes that can happen because of some sincere work that is done by journalists. We're going to be celebrating many more stories this year, and we really hope that you would be reading this book. Now, I think the media has played a very strong role in the pandemic. In fact, there is research done by the Reuters Institute as well as the global public relations firm Edelman, which shows that people are turning to mainstream news media organization to news. What media has been able to do is earn the trust of the people to be able to share important facts of the things that are happening all around us. So I think the media has played a very powerful role in the pandemic, and we still have a long way to go because coronavirus is not yet over. So, does good journalism involve both positive and negative stories? Of course, good journalism is about winning trust. And it's about reporting both the positive aspects of a story as well as the negative aspects of a story. Unless you give the complete picture, you'll never be able to win the trust of the people because people are turning to you for information. People are turning to know, okay, what's good for them. So you need to cover all sides of the story. However, I must point out that you shouldn't look for everything in one story. It's a difficult job to be able to also collect information, and sometimes one story may not have it all. It's, we might need to do follow-ups. It's only when we get all the stories, all the different aspects, can we share it with people. Yes, most certainly. We've already started working on another World News Day, and it will be celebrated on September 28th this year. And I'm really excited to share with you that the response to last year's World Day was very good. And we got about 40 newsrooms that were participating. But this time we're spreading the word globally, and we're looking forward to have at least about 100 newsrooms who will join us to share good stories about good journalism. So let me talk a little bit more about making a difference. How do we make a difference? We make a difference by just bringing issues to limelight to talk about, okay, these are the issues that are mattering to people. We are also the bond between different sectors of society. So it's like we try and get the best from governments, from businesses, from non-governmental organizations, and we try and put a collective comprehensive picture together so that it can be easily understood by a much wider community. And that's how we make a difference. And through our articles, we've also gone multimedia. So communicating is no longer just about writing stories, but it's also about good pictures, it's about good videos. We're trying to do this in very different formats. Journalism, we are in a very complex situation right now because what the pandemic has done is it's giving us readers. There are lots and lots of people who are turning to us, and readership is looking up. Subscriptions also are looking up. However, it's revenue that is a challenge. But together, I'm sure we will come up with something to be able to beat even the current crisis. I really think journalism has a future. And if you're among those who are looking forward to joining this profession, come. It's a very exciting profession to be in. No one day is really similar to the next day. Yes. After it's, when you want to make a difference, just one story is not enough. You have to do a series of follow ups and to try and get different dimensions of that story. So, in Mr. Sia's case, you couldn't do just one article, you had to explain the whole complex process just to be able to be fair to all the stakeholders involved. And of course, in other countries, they had to go deep down to figure out, okay, they wrote about it. What was the change that happened? Did systems revert to normal? If it did, then they went out again to sort of show that this problem no one paid attention to, and it's affecting so many people. There are so many people out there who don't really have voices. So those voices need to be brought out. And in places like India, you could see that policies were being changed. In Indonesia, too, it's like they constantly keep bringing out, so new rules were set up to prevent abuse from happening. So you need to keep doing follow ups on your stories. I'll be happy to answer any more questions that you have. It's quite possible. What is happening right now is everyone is paying attention to, and we'll be going through our entire collection of stories to select some of the best stories to figure in this year's book. And you can keep reading these stories in the Straits Times. You don't really have to wait for next year's book for this. The selection process will happen in the month of August. We still have a few more months to go and a lot more stories to come. The people who select the stories are the senior editors of each paper. They decide, like, which are the best stories to offer. Because what happens is, when you offer these stories for World News Day, it enters into a pool that is shared with all participating members. So it gets shared around the world. So the awareness is not only within your community, it spreads elsewhere. Thank you for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed today's session. You can reach out to me still if you have any further questions.